Hey, good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista with the Hurricane Hub discussion for Saturday, February 4th. I was about to say January, but I remember it's now February 2023. We're going to talk about today about ENSO and especially what might be coming ahead because I did see some interesting stuff this week. Plus, if you could take a look at our title card, which I finally put it as part of the welcome. I have the title card, so I don't have to go to the NHC page as my title card, even though there's nothing going on there. You can see on there, look at that, very frigid temperatures in the east. It reached roughly around 4 or 5 degrees, I believe, overnight here in Central Park, in New York City, and in Boston, I believe, further up. They were in the negatives, and I think they're still in the negatives right now. But the bottom line is that the the Northeast is dealing with a shot of cold air. Still no snow, but at least it's cold, really cold this winter. The coldest it has been since December, after a really record warm March. So we're gonna go over that in a little bit later on. But first, talking about the tropics, nothing much going on. Obviously, it's February, but still, let's start off by taking a satellite image look at the Atlantic. Nothing going on, obviously, dry air, and then you can take a look at all these upper level winds moving strongly to the east out of the west. That is indicative of strong upper level shear, and you can basically see that everywhere. And wonder why we don't have hurricane development this time of year. That is why. Look at all these strong upper level winds moving to the east and even out here in the subtropics too. I mean, obvious since we have this big extratropical system, and this is also part of the reason why we're seeing such cold air moving to the northeast, because this has to do with the northwesterly flow, I think, around this storm is causing a connection of air from Canada to come straight down into the northeast, which is why we are seeing such cold air today. But once this moves out, it's going to rebound back. But in the meanwhile, we have this big low pressure area, obviously strong westerly winds associated with it, because with these extratropical cyclones, we do have a lot of shear with them. They're not like our tropical systems in the deep tropics that we need low shear for. And then you just take a look everywhere else, you could see, even down here, you could see the strong upper level winds. And of course, the big thing else is dry air too. Look at all these low level clouds, and really very dry throughout the Caribbean too. Probably very sunny if you enjoy that. That's nice for you, even in the Gulf of Mexico and even across the United States. There's nothing too much going on except this weather system right here. I don't know what that's going to do except maybe bring a little rain, but I definitely know there's no severe weather coming with this because I looked at the SPC, and we'll go over that too in a little bit later on. But there's no severe weather with this, and it looks like in that department it'll be quiet for a while. So, with that being said, let's take a look at the SSTA temps across the Western Hemisphere, which is where we are. The Western Hemisphere, the Pacific, and all those places are the Eastern Hemisphere. Taking a look at what's going on, we have, of course, warm waters in the Atlantic. That's been the thing that we've remained to see, especially in the subtropics and the Atlantic as a whole. It's been warm. Gulf of Mexico is also very warm, and I did mention severe weather. There's not much right now, but it really depends on what the setup is this spring. If we see this southeast ridge that we've been seeing, and pretty obvious why we had a southeast ridge so far, which has basically kept the east very warm. If you're wondering why we have not really seen any snow, I mean, this is pretty much of an indicator. Big southeast ridge allowing for all these waters, especially off the Bahamas, the Gulf of Mexico, and off Florida, and even along the Gulf Stream, and perhaps for matter of fact, the Northeast too. And it's been just keeping all this warm. And if that setup persists into the spring, this energy in the Gulf, because sometimes when we have these big severe weather events, the southerly flow that comes from the Gulf really taps in as part of the energy that is being held there, really helps tap into the heat that goes into these severe weather outbreaks in the spring. So if this does stay warm, guys, I'm telling you, watch out, because we'll really have to see how this plays out, but that could lead to potentially active periods of severe weather if the setup is right, of course. If there's other things that are not there, it will not really happen, because it really needs everything to come into play, especially when it comes to big severe weather outbreaks. But this is a factor that we need to watch, because if there would be a severe weather outbreak, I would tend to believe with the Gulf of Mexico this warm, it will help with the heat energy in fueling outbreaks in the spring. But other than that, taking a look at La Nina and taking a look at how that looks, La Nina is still holding on persistently through the Central Pacific. It is now basically warmed up completely in the Eastern Pacific. If you look at the anomalies here, it's actually very warm off the coast of South America. So we all know that. Because of that, that is for sure that the La Nina is kind of moving out. We don't have this huge cold tongue of water, which we typically would with the La Nina. Usually we would have the tropics of the northern eastern Pacific and the southern eastern Pacific cold. That has warmed up, so we know the La Nina is on its way out, but we still have this part of the Pacific to watch for. The central part of the Pacific where the Nino 3.4 region is, and that is the most important part. And taking a look at the SOY and how that's comparing with this, it is still positive, and it has actually rebounded a little bit in the last few days. If we take a look at the 30-day average, it reached 9.95, below 10 after quite a while, I believe, and now the 30-day average is back up to 10.2, and the daily contribution to the SOY is at 19.41. Why this is happening, we'll go over in just a bit, but just taking a look at the SOY monthly averages. November for 4.77, that's when we saw a tank in the SOY. I think that's what kind of led to a little bit of a pattern flip that we saw in December in the Pacific, if you remember, which is especially what brought all of that rain and that severe weather to the west coast of Florida, despite it being a pretty decent La Nina. Remember that? I think November, there was something that went on there, but we saw a rebound in December in the SOY, and January, it also was pretty strong at 11 points, and the daily contribution once again is at 19. And if we take a look at how it was the past few daily contribution days across the month of January, and this is why I'm especially really questioning the validity of whether or not we'll see El Nino. And I'm going to go even more deep dive into the fact of why I'm questioning it in a little bit. But just take a look at how we've been throughout January and just count how many days we've been, especially with the SOI index in the positive. Since January 6th, look at how many days we've been with the negative SOI. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. Only 4 days we've had a negative SOI index across the month of January. And if I'm being honest with you, that does not scream El Nino is heading in by this spring. And another place that I really know that is happening, and a lot of people are questioning too, is the good old Storm 2K. If you know what that is, it's a really nice chat board to talk about not only tropics, but basically all types of weather across the United States and even extending beyond the United States. We have contributors from basically all over the Western Hemisphere, sometimes in the Eastern Hemisphere. I am a member on Storm 2K, and even them been talking about it in the ENSO part. Let me see, was this one place right here? One person that I took especially interest in is King Arabian. He said that there's strong easterly wind bursts on the 30-day CFS, the climate forecast system, with this weekly forecast, and he says he has not seen trades this fast in a while. And if you wonder what he's taking a look at, it is right here on the CFS, and this is roughly around when he posted it, February 1st, and wondering why we're seeing such a tank in the SOI or rebound in the SOI. That's why we see these very strong easterly wind anomalies, and I believe someone else also posted about it here. Is it not here? It's also on the next page. Some people were talking about it as well. This person here posted Weenie Patrol, nice name, posted as well. Take a look at these really strong anomalies that start taking effect on the GFS, kind of going off the scale when it comes to 850 zonal winds, and that is the zonal winds of the trades that we're talking about. So wonder why the SOI has really been rebounding. That is why. And with that, a lot of people have been saying, including myself, you could find a comment from me here I am, that is, and I really comped it too. because somebody else posted about this. In response to the trades, starting to see the warm pool of the equatorial Pacific, the subsurface, below the subsurface, we still see the warmth kind of trapped to the date line and west of the date line. And then notice here how we've had this small little kind of pocket of colder anomalies. You can really see it kind of spark up and then kind of develop. I guess because of the persistent trades, I did talk about it in response to that and say might expand a little now since we might see some strong trades in the next few weeks. And then somebody else said, this is not Sparta, said that if atmospheric conditions continue to be staunchly La Nina, I could definitely see a 2001 type deal where there was a push for warmer because simply there was no gas left in the La Nina, but there's no push towards a positive ENSO yet. And that's what is really the case going on here. You talked about it, that the SOI being strongly positive, that is part of the La Nina pattern. Because if you don't know what the SOI is, just to give you a quick rundown, positive territory step represents for pressure patterns, because that's what the SOI is, kind of measuring pressure patterns and their relations to trade winds in the Pacific, meaning winds that blow across in a zonal fashion in the atmosphere and how that affects the water temperatures along the surface of the Pacific. That's basically what the SOI is in a nutshell, or at least the best that I could explain it. Positive territory means the pressure patterns are in favor of stronger trades in the Pacific, which would in turn favor La Nina because we're seeing mixing and cooling of the waters. And he's talking about it here that we're not seeing any fast transition to El Nino. We're certainly not in a hurry to. So if we continue like that, there's a year that he mentioned, 2001, and it is a pretty interesting year because that year we were also coming out of a 3-year. That was the last time we had a 3-year La Nina phenomenon, which lasted all the way from 1998 all the way to 2001 when it died. And then that year, we did see basically a neutral year for the rest of the year. And then 2002, the next year is when we did go on to have a pretty decent El Nino in the Pacific. But 2001 was almost a transition year for the ENSO, where we went from La Nina to neutral. And he's mentioning that with this pattern, we might head it that way. And if you're wondering for implications for the hurricane season, could be interesting because if we don't have a El Nino, that does stand for, how we know how El Nino works. Stronger trades, stronger westerly winds, stronger wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. And I always do sometimes say, too, that those neutral years in the Atlantic is sometimes when we do have some of the most interesting years. So that is something interesting that we will be monitoring. And someone else that's also brought my interest to, World Climate Service, posted on Twitter. And I think I found this somewhat from Storm 2K or Discord. I don't remember where. But I found this and it was interesting. And this person mentioned the CFS V2, also mentioning the CFS has really backed off considerably with the El Nino in the last 2 months. It is not surprising, as January initialized forecasts are the worst of all forecasts at a 6-month lead time, due to, of course, the spring predictability barrier, which is we're coming up on that point where it's kind of the division point between the spring predictability barrier and then after that, which is when we could really start going into hurricane season a little more, and that's roughly around late March, early April. And then then this person, don't know whether it's a he or she, but I'll just say this person does say that the uncertainty does remain high for right now. And you take a look at the picture that he showed, showing El Nino really backing off. This was 8 weeks ago, roughly 2 months ago, showing how the CFS was really bullish on an El Nino. And this was, for when does he say this is valid for? June to August of 2023. 4 weeks ago, backed off, and now really still looking like we're just coming out of La Nina. And also interesting else to note that the CFS, if I could take a look at it really briefly, kind of showing that they're trending a little warmer in the Atlantic. Could that be something interesting that we need to watch? We'll see. But I just noticed that right now the CFS has actually been slowly trending towards a warmer Atlantic when it's been trending a little less with the El Nino, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing that I want you guys to take off from this is notice how you've seen models really been trending downward with the El Nino. And maybe it is a response to all of this that we've been talking about, the trades, the SOI kind of not, really being in that territory for El Nino to jump on board yet. So maybe that's in response to that. And if that continues, will be interesting, because that really will be some of the important factors we'll have to go over in the spring when it comes time to hurricane season. All right, moving on from that, let's take a look at how the SSTs are across the Atlantic, not the SSTAs. That's the anomalies, departures from normal. These are the actual sea surface temperatures of actually what the buoy data says is how warm it is actually out there right now. And if we take a look at the Gulf of Mexico, still seeing 23 degrees up right near the northern Gulf Coast. The shelf waters of the Gulf roughly around 15, 16 degrees Celsius. That's more normal. But if we take a look at what's going on in the southern Gulf, we still have, and this is quite incredible, honestly, we still have a portion of 26 degrees Celsius kind of poking its way in. And I assume that's probably with the loop current that it's poking its way up, but we still have some sort of isotherm of 26 degrees Celsius poking its way up into the Gulf. Usually, I would assume that usually that would kind of be tucked into the Caribbean in a more normal Gulf year. But take a look at the SST temps in the Gulf, the SST anomalies in the Gulf, and you wonder why we have such warm anomaly. We have such 26 degrees Celsius waters remaining. Well, the anomalies are really warm, so that does really make sense as well. And once again, I do stress the fact that it will be interesting to see how this plays out in the spring and how it really fuels into whatever severe weather outbreaks we have in the spring. But that, of course, we'll see truly how it impacts when we get there. Off the East Coast, Gulf Stream 2 is not only the Gulf, but the Gulf Stream along the East Coast, very warm. Still 26 degrees Celsius in some spots along the Gulf Stream. And sure, you might not think that that's too incredible, but for this time of year, trust me, it is incredible. Usually we don't see 26 degrees Celsius along the Gulf Stream this time of year. That's not normal, quite literally. But if you take a look at the anomalies, once again, quite a reflection why we're seeing that. Very, very above normal temperatures here. And it's associated with the southeast ridge, why we're seeing a bunch of these anomalies. But for right now, there is no severe weather as a threat. So if you're willing to kind of enjoy this, if you want to take a boat out from the coast and kind of dip into the water and play around a little bit along the Gulf Stream, it's still warm. And looks like it'll remain that way as long as we don't have any huge Arctic blasts that kind of come down from the north and kind of make their way all the way to the Gulf. But the thing is, we've actually had that at least in December, and we've not seen the Gulf really kind of cool down. I don't know if it's because it was not lasting long enough that in order to actually mix and cool the waters of the Gulf, or was it really just not that powerful enough to really mix it? I don't know. But since we're on the topic of polar outbreaks, kind of a good segue into what we're going to talk about next. Take a look at this. Nothing going on across the United States in general, and I'm going to show you with the storms at least. Not looking that way for the next 2 days solidly, at least in the severe weather department. We have some blizzard warnings. No, that's winter storm warnings up in the mountains of the California mountains, the Sierra, I believe. Probably seeing some winter conditions there, probably some snow falling. But the big story for the weather right now is this right here. Wind chill warnings. That's what they are. Wind chills reaching as low as -30s in some parts of the Northeast. And we also have this blizzard warning right here. And I actually did find out this is not because of actual snow that's occurring, but this is because of snow on the ground that's blowing because of the very strong winds that are occurring, which is also why we're seeing really, really, really frigid wind chills. And I could say that especially here for where I am, New York City, in Central Park, there was wind chills below zero overnight. And I think they're still below zero right now, but they'll slowly rebound throughout the day. But that's because of the strong winds. And because of that, there's a lot of snow in Maine right now. I think we just had quite a bit of snow. that there's a blizzard warning there because of the blowing snow that was on the ground. It's blowing around and it's reducing the visibility very low, which is why we see blizzard warning, because there's snow that's blowing around, reduces the visibility by quite a lot. And on top of that, we have wind chill warnings. Stay inside. That's all I could say, really. Really cold today. If you don't have anything to do, don't do it. Stay inside because it's really cold, but it will rebound as we go into next week, at least here in the city, New York City. There will be 50s next week once again. So stay inside and kind of wait for that to pass. I guess that's the best thing I could say. And then after that, taking a look at the Storm Prediction Center, really nothing much to talk about. This is day 2. We just looked at day 1. Basically the same thing than day 3. There's not even any thunderstorms forecast to occur across the United States, so it's looking quiet. And then days 4 to 8, we take a look at the extended outlook, day 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Nothing else going on, so really nothing to talk about and nothing to stress over except this cold that we're dealing with. And of course is ENSO, what we're going to see coming up with this hurricane season. Really interested to see. And by the way, I did forget, I was going to save a picture of the CFS V2 forecast, and so we could start to compare. Because here's what I want to do: I want to be able to take a, I want to not be able to because I can, but I want to take a CFS V2 snapshot of the CFS V2 forecast of the ENSO. That CFS V2 graph that I show, that CFS graph that I show usually every discussion of what the CFS is forecasting with the anomalies in the El Nino area. I'm going to take a snapshot of that and save it. So when we go by the months, at least leading up to hurricane season, we could save it and see how did the CFS change with its forecast over the past month. So I'm going to do that and I'll show you, and we'll look at the graph for next week when it comes out, when we get there, of course. But I'm going to do that so we can have that for next week. But other than that, everything else is just a wait and see game. Will La Nina stick around, or will it die? Or will El Nino come, or will it not come? That's all stuff we need to see. And of course, only the passage of time will answer that. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for now. This Saturday, of course, I have my discussion videos every Saturday if you want to see them, if you're looking forward to them. And especially if you want to get them right when they come out, please like, subscribe, push the notification bell, as they always say, and share with family and friends, because really wanting to reach out to the community with doing these discussions, keeping us all aware of hurricane season, which is what I am here to do, and which is what I'm hopefully all of us here to do as well, keeping us on top of the hurricane season and tracking it as a community. With that being said, have a great day. Of course, if you're in the Northeast, stay inside. I know I'm going to try to stay inside. It's real goddamn cold, but it will go away. But stay inside, stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we're back here next Saturday.